Success and failures of Stalin. Rise of Stalin 1924 to 1929. After the death of Lenin in 1924, Stalin sought to seize power for himself. His competitor was Leon Trotsky, the leader of the Red Army and the one everyone believed would become Lenin's successor. Trotsky was brilliant, however, he was unpopular with the people. Trotsky wanted a world revolution, which proposed that revolutions were the only way to achieve the goals, and for Russia and the whole world to be ruled under communism. First, Russia would become strong. Then they would try to bring a world revolution. The Russian people did not like this proposal because of the potential hardship and struggle that the revolutions would inevitably bring. Stalin proposed a different and more attractive approach to achieving communist goals, which was the idea of socialism in one country, which proposed hope for a better future without the need for revolutions. This was a smart move for Stalin because he gave an alternate solution that was in favor of with the people and did not threaten distress on the Russia. The rule of Stalin, 1929 to 1953. Goals: to make Russia communist and to build an industrial infrastructure so that Russia and its people, especially the workers, can be prosperous. Why did people like Stalin? The Russian people liked Stalin because he was a man of the people. Stalin came from a poor family of shoemakers and could really empathize with the needs of the lower class. Also, his idea of socialism in one country, which is well liked by the people because an alternative to Trotsky's proposal of world revolution, which meant that the revolution would only answer to Russia and the world's problems. Failures. Stalin's determination to turn Russia into a prosperous nation within his 5-year plans sometimes clouded his vision. His determination to always meet his production goals forced managers of factories to lie so they would not be killed. Collectivization, 1928 to 1940. Goals: to increase food production and free up labor in farms so that they could work in factories. Collectivization forced private landowners to give their land to the collective. The faults of collectivization. Food production decreased because of the kulaks, rich landowners who opposed collectivization, killing their livestock and destroying their assets. Over 17 million people from the countryside migrated to towns to work in factories. Millions of people died due to lack of food that wasn't being produced. The glories of collectivization: freed up labor in farms and brought work to factories. Brought new technology to Russia in form of factories and other increase in farm technology. The 5-year plans. First plan was from 1927 to 1932, and the second plan was from 1932 to 1937. Goals: to modernize industry and agriculture. Reasons: fear of the West eventually invading to destroy communism, believed in socialism in one country. The USSR would grow strong enough to survive, then take over the world. How they achieved their goals. The plans were accomplished through a mixture of encouragement and force. Capitalist-style incentives were introduced as piecework. Workers were paid according to how much they produced. Propaganda, posters, slogans, and radio broadcasts. Differentials were restored between skilled and unskilled workers. Workers with high output were awarded medals. Daycare and crèches allowed women to work. Factory managers and workers were pressured, penalties were severe, and there was an introduction of increased slave labor. The 5-year plans. The failures of the 5-year plans was the cost of human suffering. Discipline with harsh punishments as a consequence, sent to labor camps as punishment, and death. Slave labor, which were political opponents, kulaks, and Jews. There was secret police, deaths and accidents, wages fell, and there were basically no human rights in Russia at the time. The plans were poorly organized and inefficient. Stalin's effort had very little effect on the process that would eventually happen. The success of the 5-year plans were the coal, oil, pig iron, steel output increased at least 2 times more in the first 5-year plans and the second 5-year plans. Hundreds of factories, new mines were created. New industrial cities created, a huge dam was built to generate hydroelectric power, oil fields levered in the Caucasus, farm machinery and new techniques, and an increase in education and medicine. Mid-30s to late 1930s. The purges started in the mid-30s and continued through the late 30s. Stalin believed that the Bolshevik Party, Old Guard, represented a threat to him, and in fact suspected everyone who had any semblance of power, and he wanted them dealt with. For the purges to start, he needed a degree of legitimacy. In 1934, the head of Leningrad was murdered. Stalin asked the Politburo for their support to purge the park, and they gave their support, and the purges began. The first people rounded up were Trotskyites, which were put in prison by the NKVD. Prisoners were physically and psychologically tortured for information about other traitors to the cause. Whole families were liable to crimes committed by their husbands or fathers. No one was safe. To maintain an air of legitimacy to the purges, major figures were given a luxury of a public trial. A guilty verdict was always inevitable. Many viewed death as the best way out of life in these prisons, or to sign a confession. Stalin and Hitler. In 1939, Hitler reached out to Stalin and asked if the Soviet Union would sign a non-aggression pact. Hitler asked Stalin because he had better resources to invade, which would guarantee that both countries would not invade each other during the war, and agreed to split Poland. 17 days after Germany's invasion of Poland, the Soviet Union invaded Poland and were very successful in their campaign. Throughout the war, Germany and the Soviet Union slowly became more and more like enemies than allies because Hitler wanted to take over Europe, and coincidentally, the Soviet Union was in Europe, so he wanted to invade. So in 1941, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact by invading the Soviet Union, and in response, the Soviets stopped the Germans before Moscow.